Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the past, to a world lit only by fire and shadowed by faith. We're not visiting a king's court or a general's tent, but a small, muddy, and altogether miserable medieval village in the heart of the 14th century. And you are not a knight or a noble. You are the village priest. Your life is a repeating cycle of seasons, sacraments, and the petty squabbles of your flock. It's a world of profound certainty, where God is in his heaven and the Lord is in his manor. But what happens when a new, terrifying, and seemingly divine power arrives? A power that doesn't distinguish between the sinner and the saint, and one that rips the certainties of your world to shreds. Tonight, we're going to experience the miserable task of being a spiritual shepherd when the wolves of the Black Death are at the door. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived. Forget the plague for a minute. The diet of gritty bread and watery ale alone would have sent you running for the nearest time machine. There's no Wi-Fi, no sanitation, and the local entertainment consists of watching a pig get stuck in a fence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet and simple way to support the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always a little fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you are aware of is the damp. It is a constant, clinging companion, a feature of the air, the stone, and your very bones. It rises from the packed earth floor of your small priest's house and from the ancient, moss-covered stones of the church next door. You wake not to a summons, but to the familiar ache in your lower back. A complaint as regular as morning prayer? Your home is a simple, two-room affair, distinguished from the other wattle and daub huts of the village only by its proximity to the church and the fact that its roof leaks slightly less than most. You rise from your straw-stuffed mattress, the coarse wool of your tunic a familiar, scratchy presence against your skin. The air is cold. You can see your own breath as you pour water from a clay pitcher into a basin and splash your face. The water is shockingly cold, a jolt that serves you better than any coffee. Your first duty of the day is the bell. You walk the few steps from your cottage to the church, the wet grass soaking the hem of your cassock. The Church of St. Giles is the heart of your small world. It is the only stone building for miles. Apart from the Lord's distant manor house, it is cold, smelling of damp stone, beeswax, and the faint, lingering sweetness of yesterday's incense. You pull on the thick, rough rope, and the bell in the small tower begins to toll, its heavy, iron clang rolling out over the sleeping village and the surrounding fields. It is the village clock, the village calendar, the village conscience, and you are its keeper. Soon, your flock begins to shuffle in for morning mass. There are not many of them, perhaps 20 souls on a good day. They are the villagers of Oakhaven, a collection of families who have worked this same patch of land for generations. They are farmers, laborers, a blacksmith, a miller. They smell of earth, sweat, and wood smoke. They kneel on the cold stone floor. There are no pews here. Their faces weathered and tired. Their eyes looking at you with a mixture of reverence and simple, unlettered faith. You begin the Mass. Introibo ad altare Dei. I will go unto the altar of God. The Latin words, which you have spoken thousands of times, are a comfort. A solid, unchanging rock in a world of mud and toil. Most of your flock does not understand the words. They know the rhythm of the service. The moments to kneel, the moments to stand. The sound of the small sanctus bell you ring at the consecration. Their faith is one of feeling, of ritual, of tradition. This is the central, common fact of your existence as the village priest. You are the axis upon which their entire world turns. You christen their babies. You marry their children. You bury their dead. You are the keeper of the village's records. the mediator of its disputes, the sole source of its connection to the great, mysterious world of God and His saints. You are a figure of immense authority, and yet you are also intimately, messily, part of their lives after the short service. Your real work begins. Elspeth, the miller's wife, a woman whose tongue is as busy as her husband's millstone, comes to you for confession. She kneels at the carved wooden screen, and through the small grill, she whispers a litany of petty sins. She was jealous of her neighbor's new pig. She spoke sharply to her mother-in-law. She watered down the ale she sells at the village fair. Listening to the village's confessions is like moderating the world's most tedious and hyper-local social media feed. You assign her a penance of 5 Hail Marys and a firm admonition not to cheat her customers, and send her on her way, her soul temporarily unburdened. Next is Thomas, a young farmer whose fields lie to the north of the village. He is worried. The rains have been too light this spring. He asks you to bless his fields. This is not strictly part of the official liturgy, but it is a vital part of your job. To refuse would be to show that God is indifferent to their very survival. So you promise him that you will come out after midday. Your life is a tapestry woven from these 2 threads, the sacred Latin of the Mass and the earthy, practical needs of your flock. You are as much a spiritual farmer as a priest, tending to the souls of these people with the same seasonal rhythms that they tend to the soil. You spend the late morning in your small house, eating your own simple meal of dark bread, hard cheese, and a cup of water. You are more educated than anyone else in the village, which is not saying much. You own 3 books, a beautifully illustrated psalter that was a gift from your old mentor at the monastery, a worn copy of Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, and a book of sermons. You can read and write in both Latin and, haltingly, in English. This makes you a veritable scholar in this world. Historians still debate how literate the average 14th century village priest truly was, with evidence suggesting some could barely stumble through the Mass by rote. Their understanding of the Latin words they spoke almost as limited as their parishioners. You are one of the fortunate ones. Having spent 6 years being educated by the monks at a nearby abbey before being assigned this parish, you take out the psalter and slowly trace the beautiful, intricate letters. Sometimes you feel a profound loneliness, a longing for the intellectual companionship of the monastery, for a conversation that is not about sick cows or leaky roofs. But then you remind yourself that this is your calling, to be a shepherd, and sheep are not known for their stimulating conversation. That afternoon, you walk with Thomas out to his fields. The sun is warm on your back. You can hear the buzz of bees and the song of a lark high overhead. You carry a small wooden vessel of holy water. As you walk, Thomas points out the boundary stones and tells you the history of this land, how his father farmed it before him, and his father before him. At the edge of the field, you begin the blessing. You sprinkle the holy water on the dry soil and recite the prayers for a bountiful harvest, asking God to protect the crop from blight, from drought, from worms. It is an ancient ritual, a blending of Christian prayer and a much older, pre-Christian connection to the earth. The most important of these rituals is Rogation Tide, a 3-day period in the spring. This is an obscure detail of medieval life that has mostly been forgotten. But for your village, it is essential. During these 3 days, you lead the entire village in a great procession. You walk the boundaries of the parish, carrying banners and the cross, chanting litanies, stopping at key points: an ancient oak tree, a large stone, the edge of the Lord's woods to bless the land and pray for its fertility. It is a solemn communal act of defining your world and asking for God's protection over it. It is the spiritual mapping of your territory. Your life continues in this gentle, predictable rhythm. You preside over a wedding between 2 nervous teenagers who have been betrothed since they were children. You baptize a squalling infant. the cold holy water making him scream in protest. You try to teach catechism to a group of village children, an exercise in utter futility. You attempt to explain the nature of the Holy Trinity, but you lose their collective attention to a particularly large and interesting-looking beetle crawling on the church floor. You cannot compete with the beetle. The beetle is a more immediate and fascinating mystery. You mediate a dispute between two families whose sheep have been grazing on the same patch of common land. The argument is heated, bitter, and threatens to come to blows before you manage to impose a tense, temporary peace. You are their judge, their lawyer, and their conscience, all rolled into one, the lord of the manor. Sir Richard is a distant and mostly absent figure. You see him only a few times a year. When he attends Mass on major feast days, he is a hard man, and is Reeve. The man who manages the estate for him is harder still. The Reeve collects the taxes and enforces the Lord's justice. You and he have a wary, cool relationship. You represent the authority of God. He represents the authority of the sword. You are the two poles around which village life revolves. And so the weeks and months pass. The wheat grows tall in the fields. The village brews its terrible, watery ale for the harvest festival. The predictable sins are committed, confessed, and assigned penance. The world is stable, unchanging, and eternal. Your place in it is secure. You are Father John, the priest of Oakhaven. You know every person, every family, every field. This is your flock. This is your life. It is a small life, a quiet life, a life of endless repetitive and mundane duty. But it is your life, and you are, in your own weary way, content. One evening in late autumn, a traveler passes through the village. It is an uncommon event, and he draws a small crowd at the single fire in the center of the hamlet. He is a wool merchant, on his way from the port city of Bristol to the markets in London. He pays for his lodging for the night with a story. He speaks of the great port cities of Italy, of Genoa and Venice, and he speaks of a sickness, a terrible swift pestilence that has arrived from the east, from the lands of the Saracens. He describes men who go to bed healthy and are dead by morning. He speaks of dark, painful swellings in the groin and armpits, of fevers that burn so hot they make men mad. He says the Italian cities are full of death, that the bodies are being thrown into the sea because there is no room left to bury them. You listen to his tale, as do your parishioners. It is a fantastical story, a grim fairy tale told to frightened children. The talk of faraway, sun-drenched Italy is as remote and unreal as a story of dragons or giants. Your flock murmurs, makes the sign of the cross, and shuffles off to their huts, shaking their heads at the wild tales of travelers. You, too, dismiss it. It is a tragedy, to be sure, if it is even half true, but it is a foreign tragedy, an Italian problem. It has nothing to do with you. Here in the damp, quiet heart of England, it is a whisper from a world away, a story that will be forgotten by morning. You say a prayer for the souls of the Italians and go to your bed, secure in the solid, unchanging reality of your own small world. The wool merchant moves on, his strange and terrifying story becoming a piece of village folklore almost before his cart has disappeared over the horizon. For a time, it is a popular tale to be told around the fire on a cold night, a grim fantasy to make children shiver and women cross themselves. But stories, no matter how vivid, cannot compete with the relentless, grinding reality of village life. The harvest must be brought in, the grain must be milled, and the Lord's tithe must be paid. The merchant's tale of a distant pestilence fades, buried under the more immediate concerns of a wet autumn and the approach of a long, cold winter. Life continues in its familiar, muddy rhythm. The leaves turn from green to a brilliant, fiery gold, and then fall, leaving the trees as stark, black skeletons against a gray sky. The first frosts arrive, hardening the mud in the village lanes into treacherous, uneven ruts. The air grows sharp and carries the constant, comforting smell of wood smoke as every hut keeps its fire burning day and night. Your duties as a priest settle into their winter cadence. The congregation at morning mass shrinks even further, as the cold and the dark conspire to keep people in their beds. You spend more time indoors yourself, poring over your few precious books by the light of a tallow candle that sputters and smokes, filling your small cottage with the smell of rendered animal fat. You practice your letters, copying passages from the Psalter onto a precious, scraped clean piece of parchment. You are a lonely scholar in a sea of illiteracy, a keeper of a tiny, flickering flame of knowledge in a vast darkness. The confessions you hear are the same winter confessions you have heard every year. Sins of sloth, of gluttony over a slaughtered pig, of anger at a neighbor whose fence has fallen into disrepair. You dispense your familiar penances, your familiar words of comfort. The world, it seems, is as unchanging as the words of the Latin Mass. The rumors begin again in the dead of winter. A traveling friar, his face chapped and red from the wind, seeks shelter in the church one night. He has come from the south, from the coast, and his news is more recent and more frightening than the wool merchants. He sits by your fire, warming his bony hands, and tells you that the pestilence is no longer confined to the faraway lands of the Italians. It is in France. It has swept through the port of Marseille, through the great city of Paris. He says the King of France himself has fled the city. France, this is different. France is not a land of myth and legend. It is your neighbor, your enemy, your rival. It is just across the narrow sea. The story is no longer a fantasy from the other side of the world. It has drawn nearer. The friar speaks not just of the sickness itself, the fevers, the dark swellings he calls buboes, the swiftness of death, but of the chaos it leaves behind. He speaks of villages where the dead outnumber the living, of fields lying fallow for want of men to plow them, of wolves growing bold and coming into the towns to prey on the unburied corpses. You try to calm your own heart, to see it as another traveler's tale, exaggerated for effect, but the friar's eyes are wide with a sincere, unfeigned terror. He is not telling a story to earn his supper. He is bearing witness. He also brings with him the strange, fantastical explanations that are beginning to bubble up from the terrified continent. He tells you of the great alignment of the three superior planets Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the house of Aquarius. A celestial event that scholars at the University of Paris have declared has corrupted the very air we breathe. He speaks of tales from Cathay of vast earthquakes that have released a poisonous vapor from the bowels of the earth, a foul-smelling mist that is now drifting across the world, killing all it touches. Some even say, he whispers, that the Jews, in their eternal wickedness, are poisoning the wells of Christendom. You listen to these explanations, your mind, trained in logic and theology, rebelling against them. It seems like madness. And yet, what other explanation is there for such a monstrous affliction? You fall back on your own training. You tell the friar, and later, you tell your flock, that if this pestilence is real, it can only be a scourge from God himself, a punishment for the wickedness of the world, for the pride of kings and the greed of merchants. You preach a sermon on the necessity of repentance, of prayer, of penance. Your words are meant to be a comfort, a way of placing this incomprehensible horror within a familiar framework of sin and redemption. But looking at the frightened faces of your parishioners, you see that your explanation is no less terrifying than the story of poisoned air. The friar leaves, but his stories linger. A poison in the village's well of consciousness. The winter deepens, the snows come, blanketing the world in a pristine, deceptive whiteness. For a few weeks, the village is cut off from the outside world, and the fear recedes, muffled by the silence of the snow. But when the thaw comes in early spring, and the roads become passable rivers of mud again, the news returns, and it is worse. A tinker. his cart laden with pots and pans, brings the word that everyone has been dreading. The pestilence has crossed the channel. It has landed in England. He says it came ashore last autumn. In the port of Melcombe in Dorsetshire, a single ship, carrying a cargo of wine from Gascony, brought the sickness with it. He says the town of Melcombe is a ghost town now, that the plague has moved inland, swallowing villages whole. The news hits your small community like a physical blow. This is no longer in Italy or France. This is here, in England, on your island. The name of a real English town gives the monster a substance and a proximity that it never had before. Dorset is only a few weeks' journey away. The fear is no longer an abstract concept. It is a destination on a map. Panic begins to take root in the village. Elspeth, the miller's wife, becomes the town crier of doom, spreading the most lurid and terrifying versions of the stories. She claims the plague can be caught by looking a sick person in the eye, that it is being spread by malevolent-looking dogs. You have to admit, some of the dogs in the village are quite shifty-looking. But this is madness. Thomas, the farmer, is less concerned with the pestilence and more concerned that the fear will mean fewer merchants on the roads and a lower price for his wool at the summer market. The reeve, the Lord's man, dismisses it all as peasant superstition and threatens to put anyone who spreads fearful rumors in the stocks. You are caught in the middle, trying to be a voice of calm in a rising tide of hysteria. You preach faith, but you feel your own dread growing. You preach reason, but you have no rational explanation to offer. The news now seems to arrive with an unnatural speed. It's as if the fear itself travels faster than any man or horse. You hear that the pestilence has reached Bristol, one of the largest ports in the kingdom, then Exeter, then London itself. The stories become more detailed, more horrifying. You hear of priests who have died after giving the last rites, of entire monasteries wiped out, of men who have sealed themselves in their manors, refusing all contact with the outside world. You cannot comprehend how it moves so quickly. This is a world of slow, difficult travel, a world where news can take a month to cross the country. And yet this sickness seems to leap from city to city, from town to town, with a malevolent, supernatural speed. Historians in a future age, armed with their knowledge of microbiology, of the bacteria Yersinia pestis and its transmission through the fleas that live on black rats, would marvel at the efficiency of this medieval biological warfare. They would chart the plague's spread along the shipping lanes and trade routes, and still debate the precise vectors that allowed it to move so far. So fast. But for you, it feels like witchcraft. It feels like the air itself is sick, and the wind is carrying death from one village to the next. The first official acknowledgement of the danger comes in the form of a rider from the manor of Sir Richard. He brings a decree. The Lord has forbidden any of his tenants from traveling to Bristol or any other infected town, under penalty of being denied re-entry to his lands. The decree also announces that Sir Richard and his family have sealed themselves within their stone manor house and will see no visitors until the sickness has passed. This act, meant to show the Lord's prudence, has the opposite effect. It ignites a wildfire of panic in the village. If the Lord, in his great stone house, protected by high walls and men with swords, is afraid, what hope is there for the common folk in their huts of mud and straw? The reeve has the decree nailed to the door of your church, and your parishioners gather before it, staring at the incomprehensible words, their faces grim. You have to read it aloud to them, your own voice trembling slightly as you do. Spring turns into early summer. The fields are green and full of life. The world is beautiful, vibrant, and bursting with new growth. And yet, this terrible, invisible shadow is creeping ever closer. The roads, which should be busy with summer travelers, are becoming quiet. Fewer merchants are passing through. The visits from traveling friars and tinkers have stopped altogether. It feels as if the world is holding its breath. The final piece of news comes from a young boy. a shepherd from a neighboring village just 5 miles to the south. He is found wandering in the woods, his mind half crazed with fear and grief. He stumbles into your village and tells a disjointed, horrific story. He says a strange sickness came to his village a fortnight ago. It started with the weaver, then his family, and then it spread, house to house. He says his own mother and father are dead. He says the village is silent now, that no one comes out of their houses anymore. He ran, he says, because the silence was more frightening than the screams had been. The reeve, in a panic, has the boy locked in an empty hut at the edge of the village, declaring him unclean. But it is too late. The news is out. The pestilence is no longer in London or Bristol. It is 5 miles away. It is a day's walk. It is at your very doorstep, that evening. You stand at the edge of your churchyard, looking out at the road that leads south. The road is empty. The sun is setting, painting the sky in glorious, indifferent shades of orange and red. A profound silence has settled over the world. The birds are singing their evening songs, but beyond that, there's nothing. No carts, no travelers, no distant sounds of life. The story the wool merchant told all those months ago, the fantastical tale of a faraway sickness, is no longer a story. It has become a prophecy. It has crossed the world, crossed the sea, crossed the country, and it is now waiting just over the next hill. You look at your small church, at the huts of your sleeping village, and you feel a sense of overwhelming, terrifying dread. You are the shepherd, and you can hear the wolf howling just beyond the edge of the firelight. The waiting is a sickness of its own. After the shepherd boy's arrival, a thick, fearful quiet descends upon the village of Oakhaven. It is a silence born not of peace, but of terror. People stay in their homes. The cheerful, communal life of the village evaporates. The central fire, once a hub of gossip and fellowship, now burns untended, the lanes, usually teeming with noisy children and wandering animals, are empty. Every distant cough from behind a closed door makes you flinch. Every shadow seems to harbor a new menace. You try to maintain the rhythm of your own life, the rhythm you hope will reassure your flock. You ring the bell for morning mass each day, its lonely clang echoing over a silent, listening world. Only a handful of the most devout or the most frightened now attend, their faces pale and drawn in the flickering candlelight of the church. You preach your sermons about faith and the inscrutable will of God, but the words feel thin and hollow in your own mouth. You are offering them a shield of prayer against a hurricane. For 2 weeks, nothing happens. The shepherd boy remains locked in his hut, fed by leaving food at his door. A fragile, desperate hope begins to sprout in the village. Perhaps the sickness in his village was a local affliction. Perhaps it will pass you by. Perhaps your prayers, your isolation, have worked. The hope is a fool's dream. The summons comes on a bright, deceptively beautiful summer afternoon. A young girl, Thomas the farmer's eldest daughter, comes running to your cottage, her face slick with tears and terror. "Father, come quickly." She gasps, her small body trembling. "It's my father. He's burning with fever, and he does not know me." Your blood runs cold. Thomas. Not just any parishioner. Thomas. The young, strong farmer. His body as sturdy and reliable as the ancient oaks that bordered his fields. The man you had walked with to bless those same fields just a few months ago. You gather what you need. Your stole, the book of rites, and the small, sealed vessel containing the holy oil for extreme unction. The last rites. As you step out of your cottage and follow the girl, you feel the eyes of the village on you. Doors are cracked open. Faces peer from behind shuttered windows. They watch you walk towards Thomas's hut on the far side of the village. They are not just watching you. They are watching the beginning of their own end. Each step you take on the muddy path feels heavy, momentous. You are a physician of the soul, on your way to a house that you know, with a sickening certainty, is already dying. The scene inside the hut is one of chaotic, primal fear. The small, one-room dwelling, which usually smells of wood smoke and packed earth, is thick with the hot, cloying stench of sickness. Thomas lies on a straw pallet near the hearth, his powerful body thrashing against the rough wool blankets. His wife, Mary, is trying to hold a damp cloth to his forehead, but he flings it away with a delirious moan. Two small children huddle in the far corner, their eyes wide and dark. You approach the pallet, your heart pounding. The heat coming off Thomas's body is like that of a furnace. His skin is flushed to deep, angry red, and slick with sweat. His eyes are open, but they are glassy and unfocused. He is muttering, his words a nonsensical jumble of prayers, curses, and the names of his oxen. Thomas, you say, your voice louder than you intend. It is Father John. I have come to pray with you. He does not respond. He continues to mutter and writhe. Mary looks at you, her face a mask of desperate appeal. He has been like this since dawn. Father, what is wrong with him? You are not a physician. Your knowledge of medicine is a rudimentary collection of folk remedies and the ancient theory of the four humors. But you know that this is no ordinary fever. You remember the stories, the merchants, the friars, the shepherd boys, and you know what you must look for. With a trembling hand, you pull back the rough blanket covering him, and you see it on his inner thigh. Near the groin is a grotesque swelling. It is a hard, tender-looking lump, the size of a hen's egg, its skin stretched taut and dark, an ugly, purplish-black color. A bubo. The word from the friar's story flashes in your mind. The undeniable, physical proof of the pestilence. The stories were all true. Every last horrific word of them. You feel a wave of nausea and a surge of pure animal terror. Your first instinct is to recoil, to back away from the heat, from the smell, from the terrifying physical reality of the sickness. But you cannot. You are the priest. Your duty is here. At this deathbed, this is the miserable task. You are here to administer the sacrament of extreme unction, to prepare Thomas's soul for its journey to God. This is the moment a priest trains for, the culmination of his calling, the ideal. The ars moriendi, or the art of dying, is for the penitent to make a full confession, to receive the Eucharist one last time, to be anointed with the holy oil, and to die in a state of grace. Surrounded by the prayers of his family and his priest, it is meant to be a calm, pious, and orderly transition. But there's nothing calm or orderly here. Thomas is lost in a delirium of fever. He cannot make a confession. He cannot receive the viaticum, the final communion. You try to get him to say a prayer, but he only screams as a spasm of pain racks his body. This is not a good death. It is a biological horror show, a violent, agonizing dissolution of a man. Your sacred rituals feel flimsy, inadequate, like trying to stop a charging bull with a children's nursery rhyme. You do what you can. You kneel beside the thrashing man, trying to ignore the heat radiating from his body and the terrifying proximity of the bubo. You open your book, but the Latin words seem to swim before your eyes. You recite the prayers for the dying, your voice a desperate, shaking murmur against the backdrop of his groans and Mary's quiet, continuous weeping. You unstopper the vial of holy oil. You dip your thumb in it and make the sign of the cross on his burning forehead and on his hands, which are clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists. Peristam sanctam unctionem et suam piissimum misericordiam. Indulget tibi Dominus quidquid deliquisti. You pray, through this holy anointing and his most loving mercy, may the Lord pardon you for any sins you have committed. The ritual feels hollow, You are performing the last act of a play for an actor who can no longer remember his lines, and for an audience that is mad with grief as you pray. You find yourself thinking of the different forms of the sickness you have heard about in the rumors. This, with the buboes, is the most common form. Grimly. You know it is the best version to get. It offers a chance. However slim, perhaps 1 in 5, the friar had said, might survive if the buboes ripened and burst, releasing their foul pus. But you have also heard of the other forms. The sickness of the lungs. That causes a man to cough up blood and can pass from person to person in a single breath. And the deadliest of all, the sickness of the blood. That causes dark spots to appear all over the body and kills a man in a matter of hours. This knowledge is a new and terrible catechism. You also wonder, in a fleeting, academic corner of your mind, if this is truly the pestilence from the stories, the sheer violence of it, the speed with which it has overwhelmed this strong, healthy man, seems almost supernatural. Future historians, despite the overwhelming evidence identifying the Black Death with the bubonic plague bacterium, Yersinia pestis would sometimes voice similar doubts. They would point to the incredible speed of its transmission and its staggering mortality rate and question if it could have been something else. A different kind of disease, a hemorrhagic fever like the plagues described in the Bible. In this moment, kneeling in this foul-smelling, death-filled hut, you do not feel like you are fighting a disease. You feel like you are fighting a demon. Thomas dies just after sunset. His thrashing ceases. And a final, shuddering sigh escapes his lips. The silence that follows is more profound and more terrible than the noise that preceded it. It is the silence of a life extinguished. Mary lets out a long, keening wail of pure animal grief. Your work is not done. Now, you must bury him in normal times. The body would be washed, wrapped in a clean shroud, and brought to the church for a vigil before being buried the next day. But these are not normal times. The fear of contagion, the fear of the body itself, is overwhelming. We must bury him now, you say to Mary, your voice hoarse. Before the sun rises, she just nods, her face numb with shock. The next miserable task is finding someone to help. You go to the door of the hut and look out at the village. No one will come near. Thomas's closest male relatives, his brother and his cousins, are sealed in their own huts. Terrified, you are on your own. In the end, it is you, the grieving, terrified widow, and Thomas's 14-year-old son. A boy named Will who is trying desperately to be a man, who must perform the final. Horrific task. You find a wooden shutter to use as a makeshift bier, wrapping the still warm body in a blanket. The three of you manage to lift it onto the shutter. It is a clumsy, awful struggle. The body is heavier than you could have imagined. You carry him through the sleeping. Silent village to the churchyard. The moon is high and bright, casting long, eerie shadows. The three of you take turns with the shovel, digging a grave in the cold, hard earth of your churchyard. The sound of the spade striking stones is unnervingly loud in the stillness of the night. It is back-breaking, soul-destroying work, when the hole is finally deep enough. You say the final prayers, your voice cracking with exhaustion and grief. You lower the body into the earth. It is a clumsy, graceless affair. And then you fill the hole, shoveling the dark earth back onto the blanket-wrapped form of the man you had blessed in his fields just a few months before. When it is done, the three of you stand there, leaning on the shovel, covered in dirt and sweat, your bodies trembling. Mary and the boy begin the long, lonely walk, back to their now empty home. You are left alone in the churchyard. You look at the raw, dark patch of earth, the first grave. You know, with a certainty that sinks into your soul like a stone, that it will not be the last. You look out over your sleeping parish, at the dark shapes of the huts under the moonlight. Each one is a potential house of death. Each soul in your flock is a potential victim. Your job is no longer to shepherd them through life. Your job, your miserable, impossible, soul-crushing task, is to shepherd them through death. And the harvest has just begun. The fresh grave in your churchyard is a raw, open wound on the face of the village. It is a declaration. The waiting is over. The thing that was a distant rumor, then a nearby threat, is now a resident. It lives here now, and it is hungry for a day. An unnatural quiet settles over Oak Haven. The villagers stay locked in their huts, the silence of their fear a palpable thing. They are waiting to see if the death of Thomas was an isolated event, a single bolt of lightning from a passing storm. You know better. This was not the storm. This was the first drop of rain. The next summons comes, as you knew it would. It is for Mary, Thomas's widow, the same daughter. Her face now a permanent mask of grief. Comes to fetch you. You gather your satchel, your oil, and your book. Your movements heavy and automatic. You are already an old hand at this. You walk back to the same hut. The smell of death, which you thought had been scrubbed away by grief and fear, has returned with a vengeance. Mary lies on the same pallet where her husband died. The disease is moving through the family. A methodical, implacable predator, devouring one member after another. It is not a random scourge, it is an invasion. Her death is faster than her husband's. Her body, worn down by grief and fatigue, has little strength to fight. You perform the same rites, your words a hollow echo in the small, dark space. You anoint her forehead as her children watch. Their faces blank with a shock that is beyond tears. You have become a fixture in their nightmare, the black-robed figure who appears only when all hope is lost. This visit sets the pattern for the weeks that follow. Your life, once governed by the gentle rhythm of the church calendar, is now governed by a new and terrible liturgy. It is an endless, repeating cycle of summons and sacraments, a conveyor belt of death that begins in a fever-soaked hut and ends in a freshly dug grave. Your days become a blur of walking. You trudge from one end of the village to the other, your boots caked in mud, your satchel of last rites your constant companion. Your job has become that of a grim delivery service for the afterlife. You are summoned. You go. You watch. You pray. You anoint. You leave. And you wait for the next summons. You are called to the hut of Elspeth, the miller's wife, the village gossip, whose greatest sins were envy and a sharp tongue. Now lies silent, her breath coming in ragged. Painful gasps. The bubo in her armpit has swollen to the size of an apple, and she moans whenever she moves. She is too far gone to make a confession. You can only anoint her and pray for mercy upon a soul that, just a week ago, was only worried about the price of flour. You are called to the bedside of the blacksmith, a giant of a man whose arms were as thick as tree limbs. You have seen him hammer glowing iron into submission with what looked like effortless grace. Now he lies on his pallet, weeping like a child, his strength utterly gone. The fever has made him weak, but the fear has made him helpless. Why? Father, he whispers, his voice a hoarse croak. I have been a good man. I have always honored God. You have no answer for him. The platitudes about God's mysterious ways and the testing of the faithful feel like ashes in your mouth. This is not a test. It is a slaughter. You anoint his hands, the hands that were the source of his pride and his livelihood, and you commend his terrified soul to a God you are no longer sure you understand. The confessions of the dying are a new and special kind of hell. They are no longer the mundane, almost comforting litanies of petty village sins. They are raw, terrified, fever-induced outpourings of primal fear. People confess to things they did 30 years ago, their minds dredging up long-forgotten sins in a desperate attempt to purify themselves before they face their Maker. They confess their doubts, their despair. They ask you questions you cannot possibly answer. Is there truly a heaven? Father, a young woman you married off last spring asks you, her eyes wide and pleading. Or is this all there is, this pain? You offer the reassurances of your faith, the promise of paradise, the mercy of Christ. But your words feel like a foreign language, a set of memorized phrases that have no power against the overwhelming physical reality of the suffering before you. You are a salesman offering architectural drawings of a beautiful mansion to a person trapped in a burning building. With each visit, you become more numb, more detached. You have to. It is the only way to survive, to keep functioning. You develop a grim internal checklist, enter the hut, assess the patient's lucidity, attempt confession, recite the prayers, anoint with the holy oil, murmur words of comfort to the family, leave. It is a sacred duty that you have transformed into a mechanical process. You feel your soul slowly eroding, being ground down by the sheer repetitive horror of it all, and with every visit, your own fear grows. You are the one constant in every deathbed scene. You are the one who is exposed, again and again, to the hot breath, the unwashed bodies, the very air of the pestilence you hear, through the last remaining trickle of news from the outside world. That the mortality rate among the clergy is catastrophic. In some cities, more than half the priests are dead. Their duty is a death sentence, their piety a direct path to the grave. You no longer wonder if you will get the sickness. You wonder when. The question hangs over you like a headsman's axe. You begin to take your own crude, secret precautions. You have seen the patterns. The sickness is not some vague miasma that infects at random. It clearly passes from person to person, through a house, from one neighbor to the next. The friar's theories about poisoned air seem less convincing than the evidence of your own eyes. Historians will one day debate how much practical knowledge of contagion was gained during the Black Death, while the official medical and theological explanation was bad air or divine will. Did men like you, the frontline workers who saw the clear patterns of transmission, begin to form your own, more accurate, and more terrifying conclusions? You begin to hold a rag soaked in vinegar over your nose and mouth when you enter a sick hut. The sharp, clean smell is a flimsy shield against the stench of death. And you hope. A shield against the disease itself. You wash your hands and face obsessively in the cold water of the well after every visit. Scrubbing your skin raw, you try not to stay too long. You perform the rites as quickly as you can, and then you retreat. Your duty done. Your fear driving you back into the relative safety of the open air. You feel a profound guilt about this. Your role is to offer comfort, to stay with the dying. But your own animal instinct for survival is at war with your sacred vows, and your instinct is winning. The pestilence in Oakhaven is a grim, democratic force. It does not care about status, about piety, about wealth. It takes the reeve, the Lord's man, a man who thought his authority could protect him. You are called to his slightly larger, slightly less leaky hut, and find him just as terrified and just as helpless as the poorest laborer. It takes the young and the old, the good and the wicked. It is a terrible, shuffling dance, and death is the only one leading the steps. The old medieval motif of the danse macabre, the dance of death, which would become a popular art form after the plague, showed death leading popes, kings, knights, and peasants alike in a final, equalizing procession. You are watching a real-life performance, with a cast composed of every person you have ever known. One evening, you are so exhausted you can barely stand. You have attended 3 deathbeds since sunrise. You have eaten nothing but a crust of bread. You are trudging back to your cottage, your body aching, your soul numb. When you see a small group of your remaining parishioners gathered in the center of the village, they are not praying, they are drinking. One of them, a man whose wife you buried just 2 days ago, is laughing. A wild, high-pitched sound that is more terrifying than a scream. Another is dancing a clumsy, lurching jig. They have passed through the stages of fear and grief and arrived at a raw, desperate hedonism. If God has abandoned them, if death is coming for them all, then why not drink and dance and seize the last few moments of life? You see this, and you understand that it is not just bodies that are dying. It is the entire social and moral fabric of your world. You reach your cottage and collapse onto your pallet, too tired to even remove your mud-caked boots. You fall into a shallow, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. You are woken what feels like minutes later. A fist is pounding on your door. "Father, father!" Quickly a voice cries from outside, "It's my mother! You must come!" You lie there, in the darkness, and for the first time, you do not move. You feel an overwhelming, mutinous urge to pretend you are not there, to stay silent, to hide under your blanket and let the world die without you. The thought is so powerful, so seductive, that it paralyzes you. Your duty, your vows, your entire identity as a priest, is telling you to get up, but every fiber of your being, every instinct for self-preservation, is screaming at you to stay put, to bar the door, to save yourself. The fist pounds on the door again, more frantic this time. "Father, please." You are frozen, caught in an impossible, silent battle between your faith and your fear. The endless, miserable litany of the dying stretches out before you, a dark road with no visible end, and you do not know if you have the strength to take another step. The pounding on the door is a physical assault. The desperate cry of "Father, please" slices through your exhaustion. For a long, silent moment, you lie there in the darkness, a mutinous rebellion raging in your soul. To stay here, in the relative safety of your cottage, is to abandon your flock, your vows, your God. To go is to walk willingly into the arms of the pestilence one more time. It is a choice between the death of your body and the death of your soul. With a groan that is equal parts weariness and despair, you force yourself up. Your soul wins. For now, you open the door and follow the weeping man into the night. You perform the rites. You watch another life flicker and die. You return to your cottage as the sun is rising, the terrible, familiar cycle complete. But as the days wear on, a new, unforeseen crisis begins to develop. The problem is no longer just the dying. It is the dead, your churchyard. The small, consecrated patch of earth surrounding the Church of St. Giles has been the final resting place for the people of Oakhaven for generations. Its soil is thick with the bones of their ancestors. And now, it is full. You make this horrifying discovery on a gray, drizzly morning. You have just come from the hut of the weaver, whose entire family of 6 has been wiped out in 3 days. The last of them, a small boy, has just died in your arms. The men of the village who are still healthy, a rapidly shrinking number, are waiting for you. They have the small body wrapped in a blanket, ready for burial. You lead them to the churchyard, shovel in hand, and you search for a space. You walk the rows of old, weathered headstones and the new, raw mounds of earth that mark the plague's victims. There is no room. Every last patch of ground is taken. The village has run out of space to bury its dead. The men look at you, their faces filled with a new kind of fear. What happens now? What do they do with the body of the weaver's son? The fabric of your most sacred rituals, the rites that give order and meaning to death, is beginning to tear for a few days. A grim and terrible solution presents itself. The dead remain with the living. Families keep their deceased loved ones inside their own small huts, waiting They are waiting for someone else to die for a space to open up in the churchyard. The village becomes a collection of tiny, sealed tombs. The living trapped inside with the dead. The stench that begins to seep from these huts is a new and horrifying dimension to the village's suffering. You are beset by parishioners, their minds half crazed with grief and fear. "Father, what do we do?" they ask. "We cannot live with him in the house." The children are terrified. One man, in a fit of desperate madness, buries his wife in the small garden patch behind his hut where he grows his cabbages. It is an act of profound desecration, burying a Christian soul in unconsecrated ground, and it sends a shudder of horror through the village. But you also understand the desperation that drove him to it. You know you must do something. The ritual of burial has been overwhelmed by the sheer logistics of death. Your role must shift again. You are no longer just the village's priest. You must now become its undertaker, its sanitation officer, its crisis manager. You gather the handful of able-bodied men who remain. There are perhaps a dozen of them left who are not sick or dead. It is a grim council of war. You meet in the church, the one place large enough to hold you all at a safe distance from one another. In the flickering candlelight, you lay out the problem. We cannot bury our dead with dignity anymore. You say, your voice echoing in the empty stone building, but we cannot leave them in their homes. We must act as a community. We must collect our dead and find a place for them. A holy place, until we can give them a proper burial. There is a long silence. The men look at each other, their faces grim. They know what you are asking of them. To volunteer to handle the bodies of the plague dead. In the cities, you have heard, men known as corpse bearers or porters do this work. They are often criminals or drunkards, men with nothing to lose, who are paid enormous sums of money and who often use their position to rob the dead and the dying. But you have no money to pay. You have only an appeal to duty and to desperation. To your surprise, they agree. Led by Will, the son of Thomas the farmer, who has a quiet, grim strength that reminds you so much of his father. They form a pact. They will be the bearers of the dead. And so begins the next stage of your miserable task. A new, horrific routine is established. Each morning, you and this small band of volunteers take a large wooden cart, the one normally used for hauling hay from the fields, and you begin your rounds. You have become a refuse collector, but your refuse is the bodies of your flock. You go from hut to hut. You no longer knock and ask if the family needs a priest. You knock and ask, are there any dead for the cart? The work is dehumanizing. For both the living and the dead, you watch as families drag the blanket-wrapped forms of their mothers, their husbands, their children, out of their homes and place them by the side of the lane. They are no longer people. They are bundles. They are cargo. You and the other men. Your face is wrapped in vinegar-soaked rags. Lift the bodies onto the cart. The bodies are stiff, awkward. Sometimes they are shockingly light. Wasted by the fever, you pile them one on top of the other. At first, you try to be gentle, to maintain some semblance of reverence. But as the cart fills, as the day wears on, the work becomes mechanical. It is a problem of leverage and weight. You are packing a cart. The fact that the cargo is your parishioners becomes a distant, intellectual concept, a thing you must actively forget in order to function. As you make your rounds, you pass the great common fields that surround the village. The wheat is fully grown now, its heads heavy and golden. Ripe for the harvest, it is the best crop anyone has seen in years. And it is going to rot where it stands. The men who should be scything the wheat are either dead or hauling the bodies of the dead. You realize, with a cold, sickening dread, that the plague is a multi-headed beast. It will kill you with sickness in the summer, and it will kill you with starvation in the winter. The sight of the beautiful, abundant, and doomed harvest is one of the cruelest ironies of this entire nightmare. You try to keep a tally of the dead. When you began, Oakhaven was a parish of just over 200 souls. You lose count after the first week of carting the bodies. 100 are gone, then 120. The numbers become meaningless. The academic debates of the future will try to calculate the plague's death toll, with scholars arguing over figures of 30, 50, or even 60% of Europe's population. You are living the reality of the high end of those estimates. Your village is not losing a third of its people. It is losing almost all of them. You have become so familiar with death that you can categorize it. You see the victims of the true bubonic plague, their bodies contorted from the painful swellings. You see the victims of the pneumonic plague, their lips and fingertips blue from lack of air, their blankets often stained with the bloody sputum they coughed up in their final hours. And you see the victims of the septicemic plague, the most terrifying of all, who died so quickly their bodies show almost no external signs, save for a scattering of dark, purplish spots on their skin, a sign that their blood itself had been overwhelmed by the pestilence. One day, you go to collect the body of the Reeves' wife. He, too, is dead, but his body lies in the same room. You find, hidden in a small chest, a small stash of silver coins. It is more money than you have ever seen in one place. You know that you and the other men, the corpse bearers, could take it. Who would know who is left to enforce the law for attempting? Terrible moment. You consider it. You could use the money to flee, to escape this doomed, dying place. But you look at the faces of the other men, and you see not greed, but a weary, hollowed-out sense of duty. You close the chest and leave the coins where they are. You have lost your faith, perhaps, but you have not yet lost your soul. The bodies on the cart are taken to an empty barn at the edge of the village, which has become a makeshift mortuary. The pile grows higher each day. The smell becomes a permanent miasma that hangs over the entire village. A constant, sweet, sickly reminder of the scale of the disaster. You know this cannot continue. The bodies must be put in the ground. The churchyard is full. You are out of consecrated land. The thought of simply digging a pit in a common field is a spiritual horror. It is an act of mass desecration. But you have no choice. The logistical nightmare has created a spiritual crisis that you, as the priest, are the only one who can solve. You find a fallow field, a patch of land that was not planted this year, a quarter-mile from the village. It is a pleasant spot. On a small rise overlooking a stream, you take your cross from the church altar, you fill a vessel with holy water, and with your small, ragged band of corpse bearers as your congregation, you perform the most important and most heartbreaking ritual of your life. You walk the perimeter of the field, your voice chanting the Latin prayers of consecration. You sprinkle the holy water onto the grass and the wildflowers. You are blessing this ground, declaring it to be as holy as the churchyard itself. You are creating a new cemetery, born of necessity and despair. When you have finished, you walk to the center of the field, you take the wooden cross, and with all your strength, you drive its sharpened end into the soft earth. It stands there, stark and lonely against the sky. Here, you say to the men, your voice cracking with the strain, we will dig here. You do not say that you will dig graves, plural. You all know that you no longer have the time or the strength. For that, you are consecrating this field for a single, terrible purpose. You are here to dig a pit. The digging of the pit is the beginning of a new kind of hell. The act itself is a brutal, soul-crushing labor. The remaining healthy men of the village, their faces grim and set, work in shifts, tearing into the soft earth of the consecrated field. The hole grows wider and deeper, a gaping rectangular wound in the landscape. It is not a grave. It is a trench, an open maw waiting to be fed when it is deep enough. The truly miserable task begins. You and the other men return to the barn where the bodies have been piling up. There are more than 30 of them now, a tangled, silent heap of what were once your parishioners. The work of moving them from the cart to the pit is a descent into a nightmare that has no bottom. All pretense of reverence is gone. There is no time for individual prayers, no gentle lowering of a loved one into the earth. The bodies are dragged from the cart and slid, or thrown into the pit. They land with a soft, heavy thud, their limbs tangling in a grotesque, unnatural embrace. You see the faces of people you have known your entire life. Elspeth, the gossip, lies next to the silent blacksmith. The young couple you married last spring are now jumbled together in a final. Terrible consummation. You work mechanically. Your mind a merciful blank. You cannot allow yourself to think. You cannot allow yourself to feel. You are no longer a priest. You are a laborer in a charnel house, a sanitation worker at the end of the world. When the last body from the barn is in the pit, you do not fill it. You know you will need it again tomorrow. You simply cover the pile of your dead neighbors with a thin layer of soil and lime. A pathetic attempt to keep the stench down and the animals away. This act, the abandonment of the sacred, individual Christian burial, is the final straw for the village's already fractured soul. The rituals that gave meaning to life and death have proven useless, and into the spiritual vacuum left by this failure rush fear, madness, and despair. The orderly, God-fearing community of Oakhaven dissolves. Some of your remaining flock, a small and hardy group of hedonists, give up on God entirely. They are led by the man you saw dancing a few nights ago. He and his followers break into the Reeves house and the homes of the other wealthy dead, taking the food, the ale, and the wine. Their days are a blur of drunken revelry. You see them in the village square, laughing too loudly, their eyes bright with a nihilistic fire. They believe they are already dead men walking, so they have decided to enjoy the short, brutal time they have left. You pass them, and they offer you a swig from a stolen wineskin. Have a drink. Father, one of them shouts. God is either dead or he doesn't care. So we might as well be merry. You want to rebuke them, to speak of sin and damnation, but you cannot find the words or the conviction. In a strange, terrible way, you understand their logic. What comfort can heaven offer against the immediate, tangible reality of the pity? Others turn not to hedonism, but to a dark, churning world of superstition. With your prayers having failed, they seek protection in older, wilder forms of magic. They hang bundles of herbs over their doors. They carve strange symbols into their lintels. They whisper that the plague is not a sickness, but a curse, an act of witchcraft. They need someone to blame. A human face for this faceless horror? Their fear settles on an old woman named Agnes, who lives as a recluse at the edge of the woods. A woman long suspected of knowing a little too much about folk remedies and curses. You have to physically intervene to stop a small, angry mob from dragging her from her hut and burning her as a witch. Your authority as a priest is so diminished that you are reduced to a shouting peacekeeper, trying to reason with people who have abandoned reason itself. You have gone from spiritual advisor to riot police in a matter of weeks, and then the flagellants come. You hear them before you see them, a distant, rhythmic chanting, a grim and mournful sound that drifts on the summer air. They appear at the edge of the village, a procession of 30 or more figures, marching in double file. They are stripped to the waist, their faces hidden by hoods, their backs a crisscrossed. Bloody mess of old and new wounds in their hands. They carry heavy leather scourges, tipped with sharp pieces of iron. They are the Brotherhood of the Cross, one of the many flagellant movements that have sprung up across Europe in response to the plague. They are fanatics, believing that the Black Death is God's punishment for humanity's sins, and that the only way to appease his wrath is through extreme, public penance. They travel from town to town, a walking, wailing spectacle of self-mortification. They march into the center of your village and form a circle. They begin a low, moaning chant, and then, as the chant reaches a crescendo, they begin to whip themselves. The sound of the iron-tipped leather hitting their own flesh is a series of wet, sickening cracks that echo through the silent village. They whip their backs, their chests, their shoulders, until the blood flows freely, spattering the ground and their own bodies. Some of them collapse in ecstatic. Pain-induced trances, your few remaining parishioners watch, mesmerized for them. This is a powerful, terrifying, and deeply compelling performance. Your own prayers were quiet, formal, and most importantly, ineffective. This is a raw, bloody, and desperate attempt to storm the gates of heaven, to force God to pay attention. Several of your flock, their faces alight with a new, wild-eyed fervor, fall to their knees and join the flagellants. Beginning to beat their own chests with their fists, you confront the leader of the group, a tall man with the eyes of a mad prophet burning in his skull. You tell him to take his brotherhood and leave, that he is spreading fear and heresy. He laughs at you. Look around you. Priest, he says, gesturing at your half-empty village, at the waiting plague pit on the hill. Your prayers have failed. Your God has turned his face from you. We offer the only currency that he will accept now, the currency of pain. We punish our own bodies so that he will not have to punish us further. You have no answer for him. His faith, as twisted and as horrifying as it is more robust than your own, which is now a hollowed out, empty shell. The flagellants stay for 2 days, their grim rituals dominating the village. Before they move on, leaving behind a new strain of hysterical, bloody-minded fanaticism, this is the chaotic landscape of your new ministry. You are a shepherd whose flock has scattered, some turning into wolves, some into frightened sheep bleeding for a new shepherd. Any shepherd, no matter how mad. The academic debates of the future about whether the plague fostered piety or heresy would seem absurd to you. It fostered everything at once. It was a spiritual explosion, shattering the old faith into 1,000 desperate, misshapen pieces. And in the midst of this chaos, your own faith completes its long, slow, agonizing collapse. It does not happen in a single, dramatic moment. It happens in the quiet moments between the horrors. It happens when you are saying Mass to an empty church, the Latin words feeling like nonsense syllables in your mouth. It happens when you are scraping the mud from your boots after another trip to the plague pit. And you realize you have not actually prayed. Not really prayed with any hope or belief in weeks. Your prayers have become a nervous habit, a set of memorized phrases you recite to ward off the encroaching silence. The breaking point comes on a sweltering afternoon. You are called to a hut where a mother and her newborn infant, a child you baptized only a month ago, are both dying. The mother is already gone, but the baby is still alive, its tiny body burning with fever. A small, dark bubo visible in its neck. You are supposed to anoint this child, this innocent, sinless creature, and commend its soul to the merciful God who is so cruelly and inexplicably torturing it to death. You cannot do it. You stand over the dying infant, the vial of holy oil in your hand, and you feel a surge of something hot and black in your chest. It is not grief. It is not fear. It is rage. A pure, profound, and blasphemous rage directed at the silent, empty heavens, at the God who would allow this, at the entire theological framework that has proven to be a comforting lie. You turn and walk out of the hut, leaving the rites unsaid, the oil unused. You walk through the dead village, past the drunken revelers and the self-flagellating penitents. You walk into your empty church. You stand before the high altar, before the great wooden crucifix that hangs in the shadows. You look up at the carved, suffering face of Jesus Christ for your entire life. This image has been a source of comfort, a symbol of redemptive sacrifice. Now, It seems like a cruel mockery, a symbol of a God who specializes in pointless suffering. You do not kneel, you do not pray, you simply stand there, in the vast echoing silence of your holy place, and you feel the last vestiges of your faith drain out of you, leaving a void that is colder and emptier than any grave. You have lost your flock, you have lost your world, and now, in the deafening silence of your own church, you have lost your God. You are utterly and completely alone. You do not run. You do not hide. The moment of crisis in the church, that white-hot surge of rage and despair, cools into something else. Something cold, quiet, and empty. Your faith may be a hollowed-out ruin, but your body, your miserable, exhausted body, still knows the rhythms of duty. The man outside is still pleading. His mother is still dying. And you are still the priest. You push open the heavy church door, step out into the night, and follow him. You are an automaton, a machine made of prayers and rituals. You perform your function. You watch another soul depart. The emptiness inside you is a strange, quiet shield. The horror cannot touch you if you are already dead inside. The days that follow are a blur of this empty, mechanical duty. But the nature of your work shifts again. The litany of last rites begins to slow, not because the sickness is abating, but because there are fewer and fewer people left to die. The new, all-consuming task. The focus of all your waking hours is the pit. The plague pit is now the true center of village life, the dark sun around which your miserable world revolves. The digging itself was an act of desecration, a violation of centuries of tradition, but the daily use of it is a continuous, soul-grinding horror that dwarfs everything that has come before. The new morning ritual begins with the cart. You and the 4 other men who are still healthy enough to work will. The farmer's son, and 3 grimly silent laborers no longer even call yourselves the corpse bearers. You are the pit crew. You meet at the empty barn as the sun rises. The air cool and damp. The pile of bodies inside is smaller now, a testament to the dwindling population. You load the cart. There is no ceremony, no pretense of gentleness. You are clearing out refuse. The dead have become a logistical problem to be solved. Then comes the slow, heavy procession to the field. The path is well worn now, a dark scar leading from the village to the new graveyard. The cart's wheels groan under the weight. You walk in silence. The only sound your own labored breathing and the creak of the axle. Arriving at the pit is like arriving at the edge of the world. It is a great, gaping mouth in the earth, perhaps 50 feet long and 10 feet wide. It is deeper than a man is tall. The bottom is already covered with the lumpy, indistinct forms of your parishioners. You back the cart up to the edge. And then comes the worst part. The tipping. The bodies slide out in a tangle of limbs, their blanket shrouds coming undone. They tumble into the pit with a series of soft, heavy thuds that seem impossibly loud in the morning quiet. It is the sound of finality, the sound of a person becoming a thing. You do not look at their faces. You cannot. You focus on a point on the horizon, on the shape of a cloud, on the handle of your shovel. You detach your mind from your body. Your body is doing this monstrous work, but your mind, your soul, is somewhere else, floating in a gray, featureless void after the bodies are in the pit. The next stage of the work begins. You have learned, through grim trial and error, that the stench of decay, the miasma, is a danger in itself. According to the physicians and scholars, this corrupt air, the air corruptus, is the very medium through which the pestilence travels. To leave the bodies uncovered is to invite the plague to spread from its source. So, you must cover them. You shovel a thick layer of the excavated earth back into the pit, just enough to cover the newly added layer of the dead. Then, you break open sacks of quicklime. A caustic white powder that you haul from the village tanner's shed? The lime, you have been told, will hasten the decay and purify the air. You spread it over the soil, where it sizzles and smokes as it touches the damp earth. The acrid smell of the lime mingles with the sweet, sickly smell of death, creating a new and uniquely foul perfume for your dying world. This process, this layering of bodies, earth and lime, is the scientific frontier of your disaster management. It is a desperate, primitive attempt to impose a kind of sanitary order on a situation of absolute chaos. It's the 14th century equivalent of a hazmat protocol. The pit crew, your small band of brothers in this apocalyptic labor, is bound by a silent, unspoken pact. You work together with a grim efficiency, but you barely speak. What is there to say? You are all witnesses to the same horror. You are all collaborators in the same grim necessity. You see the toll it is taking on them. Will, who is only a boy, now has the haunted, hollowed-out eyes of an old soldier. The other men have a permanent tremor in their hands. You are all being irrevocably damaged by this work. You wonder what will become of you when this is over. How does a man who has tipped his neighbors into a mass grave ever return to a normal life? How does he sit down to a meal, or listen to a child's laughter, or look his wife in the eye? Historians of the future will debate the long-term psychological trauma of the plague, the collective PTSD that must have afflicted the survivors. They will write papers about the rise of macabre art and the obsession with death in the following decades. You do not need to debate it. You are living it. You are a walking, breathing trauma, and you know, with absolute certainty, that you will never be clean again. The stain of the pit will be on your soul forever, as the weeks of high summer wear on. The village continues to die around you. The work of the pit crew becomes grimly efficient, but the number of bodies you collect each morning begins to dwindle. The hedonists who were drinking the Reeves wine are all gone now. They're brief. Desperate revelry silenced. The last of the flagellant-inspired penitents have succumbed. Their piety no protection. The village is becoming a ghost town. The silence is profound. You can walk from one end of Oak Haven to the other and not see a single living soul. The only signs of life are the smoke from a handful of chimneys and the slow, steady work at the plague pit. One day, you make your rounds with the cart, and you collect only 2 bodies. An old man and his wife, who had managed to survive this long, only to fall at the very end. You take them to the pit and give them their unceremonious burial. The next morning, you and the pit crew meet at the barn. It is empty. You make your rounds through the entire village, knocking on the doors of the few remaining occupied huts. Any dead for the cart you call out, your voice echoing unnervingly in the silent lanes. No one answers. No new bodies are brought out. You wait a full day. You do not work on the pit. You simply wait, listening. The silence is absolute. There are no new cries of grief, no new whispers of a fresh fever. The next day is the same. Silence. It takes you a moment to understand what this means. The understanding dawns slowly, not as a feeling of joy or relief, but as a simple, stunning realization. The pestilence is over. It has not been defeated. It has not been cured. It has simply stopped. It has run out of fuel. It has killed everyone it could. And now it has moved on. The final task remains. You and the other 4 men go to the pit. It is not full, but it is a deep, layered cake of death. You must close it. You must bury the horror. The work takes 2 full days. It is the most physically exhausting labor you have ever done. You shovel the remaining piles of earth back into the hole, ton after ton, until the great gash in the earth is filled. You build it up into a long, high mound, a featureless barrow for a lost tribe. When you are done, the 5 of you stand there, leaning on your shovels, your bodies screaming with pain, your clothes soaked with sweat. You look at the great, silent mound. It holds nearly everyone you have ever known. your parishioners, your friends, your enemies, the gossips and the pious, the strong and the weak, the old and the young, all of them, together in a final, democratic, anonymous embrace. There are no headstones, there are no names, there is only a great ugly scar on the land, a testament to an apocalypse. You, the village priest, the shepherd, have buried your entire flock in a single, monstrous grave. The physical work is done. The pit is closed, but as you stand there, in the quiet of the empty field, under the indifferent blue sky, you are left with the most miserable task of all the tasks of being alive in a world of ghosts. The work is finished. The pit is closed. The five of you, the priest, Will, the farmer's son, and the three remaining laborers stand on the hill, leaning on your shovels, looking at the monstrous, silent mound that now dominates the landscape. The sun is setting. No one speaks. There are no prayers to be said. No words of comfort to be offered. You have completed a task so far beyond the bounds of normal human experience that language itself fails. You do not walk back to the village together. The grim camaraderie of the pit crew dissolves the moment the work is done. Each man peels off, drifting away to his own solitary corner of the silent world, to grapple with the ghosts in his own head. You are left alone, standing by the mass grave of your flock, a shepherd whose field is now barren. The days that follow are stranger than the horror that preceded them. The terror of the plague was a sharp, focused, all-consuming thing. It was a storm that demanded all of your strength and attention. The silence that comes after is a different kind of challenge. It is a vast, empty ocean of time, and you are adrift in it. The adrenaline that has fueled you for weeks drains away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that is more spiritual than physical. You sleep for nearly a whole day, a heavy, dreamless sleep, and you wake up feeling not rested, but hollowed out. The world is unnaturally quiet. The constant background noise you were never aware of until it was gone, the shouting of children, the lowing of cattle, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. The rumble of the mill has been extinguished. All you can hear is the wind whistling through the empty huts and the rustle of the unharvested wheat in the fields. Your first duty is no longer spiritual. It is practical. You must take a census. You must learn the exact dimensions of your new, shrunken world. You must count the living. You begin your grim accounting. You walk through the deserted lanes of Oakhaven, your footsteps echoing unnervingly. The village is a gallery of interrupted lives. You push open the door to the weaver's hut. The loom stands in the center of the room, a complex web of threads, a colorful piece of cloth, half finished. A shuttle lies on the floor where it was dropped. It looks as if the weaver simply stood up and walked away. But you know better. You carried him, his wife, and his 4 children to the pit yourself. You moved to the next hut, the home of a family you knew well. A wooden doll lies on the dirt floor, a cauldron of old. Hardened pottage sits above a cold hearth. It is a scene of sudden, absolute departure. You feel like an intruder, a trespasser on the sacred ground of a family's last moments. But you must know. You call out at each hut. Hello, is anyone there? Mostly, there's only silence, the silence of the dead. But then, a miracle. From one of the small huts near the stream, a child's face peeks out, followed by his mother's. It is the widow of a man who died early on. She and her son have survived. How you have no idea. They were too terrified to leave their home. And by some random, blessed quirk of fate, the sickness passed their door by. They are thin, hungry, and traumatized. But they are alive. They are the first 2 names on your list of the living. You continue your survey. You find an old man, a woodcutter named Alfred, who is deaf and had no idea of the full extent of the horror until you appeared at his door. He had simply thought the village had grown quiet. You find another family of 3, huddled in their cellar. who have survived on a small stash of dried apples. And you find the shepherd boy, the boy who brought the first direct news of the plague, the one the reeve had locked away in an empty hut. You had forgotten him entirely in the chaos. You approach the hut, fearing the worst. But when you unbar the door, you find him inside, alive. He has survived on the scraps of food left for him and by drinking rainwater. He is feral, terrified, but alive. You gather your new flock. You bring them all to the church. The only building large enough and safe enough to hold you all? You count them. There is you. There are your 4 companions from the pit crew. There is the widow and her son. There is the old woodcutter. There is the family of 3. And there is the shepherd boy, 13 souls. You do the math in your head, and the number is so staggering it makes you dizzy. Your parish once held more than 200 people. 13 are left. The great mortality in Oakhaven has claimed more than 90% of the population. Your village has not just been decimated, it has been erased. It is now officially a ghost town, a lost village. One of the many that historians will find on old maps. Places that simply ceased to exist after the year of the plague. You look at the faces of your new congregation. They are not joyful. They are not celebrating their survival. They are numb, shattered, hollow-eyed. The psychological shock of being the last one standing is a heavy, crushing weight. This is the reality behind the academic debates about the plague's psychological impact. There is no zest for life here, no feeling of relief. There is only the profound, shared trauma of the survivor. The living do not envy the dead, but they do not yet know how to live. In the days that follow, you try to piece together a new kind of community. The old laws and customs are meaningless now. You pass the reeve's empty house and think of the complex web of duties and tithes that once governed this village. You think of the Harriet Law, the death duty that required a peasant's family to give their best animal to the Lord upon their death. The peasants are dead. The reeve is dead. The Lord is a distant, irrelevant memory, and the animals now wander the empty fields, belonging to no one. The entire economic and legal structure of your world has dissolved. You are now the de facto ruler of a bankrupt kingdom of ghosts. You try to bring back the comfort of ritual. You hold a mass in the church. The 13 of you are a tiny, pathetic cluster in the vast, empty stone building. Your voice echoes in the silence. It feels less like a service and more like a gathering of ghosts in a tomb. The biggest problem is a simple one: food. The harvest is rotting in the fields. The village's stored food is almost gone. But the survivors, lost in their own grief, have little will to work. They sit and stare. They weep at random moments. They wander the empty lanes like lost souls. You realize that your job as a priest has changed once again. You are no longer an undertaker. You must now become a leader, a motivator, a man who can coax the living back to the land of the living. You start with the children. You take the widow's son and the shepherd boy, and you put them to work on a simple, tangible task. You have them help you clear out the church, sweeping the floors, polishing the altar. You take the family of 3 and set them to work in your own small vegetable garden. You take Will and the other men, and you begin the grim task of going through the empty huts, salvaging what you can: tools, preserved foods, warm blankets for the coming winter. Slowly, very slowly. The rhythm of work begins to heal the paralysis of grief. The simple, repetitive act of weeding a garden, of stacking firewood, of mending a fence, is a kind of therapy. It is a small rebellion against the chaos. One evening, you gather everyone in your cottage, the largest and most intact dwelling left. You have salvaged enough food for a proper communal meal. It is a strange, quiet, and deeply sad affair. Every person at your small table is nursing an unimaginable loss. But you are together. You are the last of Oakhaven. After the meal, you do the thing you have been dreading. You take out the parish register, the thick vellum book where for years you have recorded the life of the village in your careful, neat script. The last entry, from months ago. is the baptism of the infant you saw die in its mother's arms. You dip your quill in the ink pot. You must now perform your final, miserable duty. You must become the archivist of your own apocalypse. You turn to a fresh page. At the top, you write, Anno Domini 1349. Herein are recorded the names of those taken by the great mortality. And then you begin to write, Thomas Farmer, Mary, his wife, Elspeth, wife of the miller, John, the blacksmith, and his wife, and his 3 sons. The scratching of your quill is the only sound in the room. The list goes on, and on, and on. You write until your hand cramps, until the candle burns low. You are writing the obituary for your world. Each name is a ghost, a memory, a story that only you now remember. It is an act of defiance against the silence, a refusal to let them be forgotten. This, you realize, is your new faith, not faith in a distant, silent God, but faith in the simple, sacred, and heartbreaking act of bearing witness. The scratching of your quill in the parish register is the only sound in a world that has gone silent. The list of the dead is long, a litany of loss that fills page after page when you finally write the last name. You do not feel closure. You feel the profound, hollow echo of a great emptiness. The chronicle of your world is complete. And now, you and the 12 other survivors have to learn how to live in it. The immediate aftermath of the plague is not a time of relief, but one of a strange, disorienting stillness. The adrenaline is gone, the constant. Gnawing fear has been replaced by a dull, heavy blanket of grief. Your small band of survivors moves through the ghost village like sleepwalkers, each wrapped in their own private shroud of loss. The practical realities, however, do not wait for grief to run its course. Winter is coming. The harvest is rotting in the fields. Your meager stores of food are dwindling. Survival is still a battle, but the enemy has changed from a raging fire to a slow, creeping frost. It is you who must rally them. Your faith in God may be a smoldering ruin, but your role as the village priest, as the only remaining figure of authority and learning, remains. You have spent months shepherding your flock through death. Now you must learn to shepherd the living. You gather your tiny congregation. The 13 of you stand in the empty village square. You look at their faces, Will. The farmer's son, his young face aged with a man's sorrow, the widow, her eyes still red from weeping. The 3 laborers, their hands calloused but their spirits broken. The old woodcutter. The family of 3. The feral shepherd boy. This is your flock. This is all that is left of Oakhaven. The plague is over, you say. And the words sound strange and foreign. But our work is not. We have survived. Now we must live. And to live, we must eat. The harvest is waiting. Your words are met with blank stares. The task seems impossible. The vast fields of golden wheat that surround the village were once harvested by 100 men. How can a handful of you possibly bring it in? This is where Will steps forward. In the absence of his father, he has found a grim maturity. We cannot harvest it all. Father, he says, his voice quiet but clear. It is impossible, but we do not need it all. We are not feeding a village anymore, we are feeding ourselves. He is right. The scale of your life has been brutally, irrevocably reduced. And so, you begin the great gleaning in normal times. Gleaning was the right of the poorest villagers to pick up the stray stalks of wheat left behind after the main harvest was complete. Now, you are all gleaners. You are the poor, picking through the wreckage of your own former prosperity. The work is hard and heartbreaking. You and the other men go into the fields with scythes. You don't try to clear the whole field. You cut what you can. A small patch here, another there, leaving the vast majority of the golden crop to the birds and the rain. The women and children follow behind, gathering the stalks, binding them into sheaves. You, the priest, the man of books and Latin. Learn the back-breaking work of swinging a scythe, of threshing the grain on a hard-packed floor to separate the wheat from the chaff. Your body aches in new and excruciating ways. But there is a strange comfort in the physical labor. It leaves no room for thought, no space for the ghosts to crowd in. As you work, a new social order is born, not of law or custom, but of pure necessity. The old hierarchies are meaningless. You are the priest, but you are also a farmhand. Will is a farmer's son, but he is also a leader. His practical knowledge of the land now more valuable than any title. The widow, once just a wife, is now in charge of the communal store of food, rationing it with a careful hand. You are no longer a village. You are a survivalist colony. You consolidate your lives. You abandon the scattered, isolated huts. The 13 of you move into the 4 sturdiest cottages clustered around the church, including your own priest's house. You create a tiny, defensible hamlet in the heart of the ghost town. You share a common fire, a common meal. You are a new, strange, and deeply traumatized family. Months pass. You survive the winter on your meager harvest and a fierce, stubborn refusal to die. The snows come, blanketing the silent village, hiding the scars for a time. Spring arrives, and with it, the first signs of the world beyond your isolated valley. A man on horseback rides into the village. He is well dressed, and he carries himself with an air of authority. He is the new Reeve. An agent sent by Sir Richard's heir for you learned Sir Richard himself and his family also perished, sealed in their manor. The agent has come to assess the state of the estate and, more importantly, to collect the Lord's dues. He is utterly unprepared for what he finds. He looks at your tiny, ragged band of survivors, at the dozens of empty, collapsing huts, at the fields overgrown with weeds. His face a mask of disbelief. He carries a long scroll, a list of the tenant families who owed service to the Lord. He begins to read from it. The family of Thomas the farmer. He reads, owes the Heriot of 1 prize ox for the death of the tenant. Will steps forward. Thomas is dead. His wife is dead. The ox is dead. There's nothing to collect. The agent, flustered, moves down the list. The family of John the blacksmith owes 2 years of back rent. The blacksmith is in the pit on the hill, you say, your voice cold and even. Along with his entire family, if you wish to collect his rent, you will need a shovel. The agent stares at you, his mouth agape. He is a man whose entire world is based on a set of rules, on a ledger of debts and duties, and he has walked into a place where those rules no longer apply. He tries to assert his authority, to threaten you with the Lord's justice. You and the other men simply laugh. It is a harsh, bitter sound, but it is also a sound of newfound power. What can his Lord do to you? Throw you off the land? You are the only people left to work it. Impose a fine. You have no money. The currency of the old world is useless here. The fundamental equation of power has been inverted. For centuries, land was scarce and labor was plentiful. Now, land is everywhere, vast and empty. It is living, breathing. Working men who are the rare and precious commodity, the agent, defeated and confused, threatens you with the censure of the church, with excommunication for your defiance. But the threat feels hollow. You know the church is in chaos. You know the bishops are struggling to find enough living priests to fill the thousands of empty parishes across the country. The grand, powerful institution of the church is wounded. But you, the humble priest of this forgotten, God-forsaken village, have never been more essential. You are the law, the faith, and the government of Oakhaven now. You are all that is left. The agent leaves, sputtering empty threats. His departure is a profound moment. It is your community's declaration of independence. You have survived the plague. You will not now be conquered by a list of old debts. That evening, you hold a feast. It is a pathetic feast by the standards of the old world, some thin vegetable stew, a loaf of gritty bread, and some weak ale brewed by the widow. But for you, it is a banquet. It is a celebration of your survival, of your resilience, of your new, defiant freedom. You look around the fire at the faces of your new family. Will, the boy who has become a man, the widow who has become a leader, the shepherd boy who is finally learning to smile again. You are a strange, broken, and beautiful community. Forged in the crucible of the world's greatest catastrophe, your faith in the God of the heavens, the distant, silent God of your training, is gone. It died in the sick huts and was buried in the plague pit. But as you look at these faces, you feel the stirring of a new kind of faith, a faith in the simple, stubborn, and sacred bonds of human community, a faith in the ability of people to endure the unimaginable, and to then get up the next morning and begin the hard work of rebuilding. You are no longer just the shepherd of their souls. You are the architect of their new world. And for the first time since the wool merchant told his terrifying story, you feel a flicker, not of hope, but of something harder and more durable purpose. The years pass, as they always do, burying the horrors of the past under the slow, steady accumulation of new seasons. 30 years. A lifetime. You are an old man now. The last man in Oakhaven who truly remembers the great mortality. The others who survived it with you, your grim band of brothers from the pit crew, have since gone to their own. Peaceful. Individual graves in the now expanded churchyard. Will, the farmer's son, lived to see his own sons grow tall and strong before a winter fever took him. The widow passed in her sleep, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. You have outlived them all. You are the sole curator of the village's memory. You sit on a bench outside your small priest's house, the same house you've occupied for more than 50 years. The evening sun is warm on your face. Your hands, resting on your knees, are gnarled and spotted with age. Your back is a constant, dull ache, a souvenir from the days of hauling the dead and digging the pit. The Oakhaven that lies before you is not the village you first came to, nor is it the ghost town you inherited. It is something new, something reborn. It is smaller, more compact. The huts are sturdier, many of them built with stone salvaged from the collapsed dwellings of the dead. The fields are all tended now, the land redivided among the few families that remained. Paradoxically, the survivors are more prosperous than their parents ever were, with so much land available and so few hands to work it. Each family controls more than they ever dreamed of. This is the great, cruel irony of the plague. It was a terrible reaper, but for those it spared, it left behind a world of unexpected opportunity. A group of children are playing in the village square, their shouts and laughter echoing in the warm air. They are the grandchildren of the survivors. They are healthy, strong, well-fed. They know you as the old priest, a quiet, stooped figure who tells them stories they do not know, cannot possibly comprehend. The story that is written into the very soil beneath their feet. A young man approaches you. He is Brother Michael, a priest in his 20s, sent by the bishop a few years ago to assist you and eventually to take your place. He is earnest, pious, and full of the book learning and formal theology that you yourself once possessed. He sees the world in clear terms of sin and grace, of doctrine and heresy. He looks at you with a mixture of respect for your age and a slight bewilderment at your simple, pragmatic faith. Father John, he says, his voice full of youthful energy. I was reading in the diocesan records. They say this parish lost more than 9/10 of its souls during the pestilence. I cannot even imagine it. You smile, a faint, weary smile. Imagination is not strong enough. Michael. You had to live it. Later. You take him into the church and show him the parish register. You open it to the pages you filled all those years ago. Anno Domini 1349. Herein are recorded the names of those taken by the great mortality. You watch his face as he reads the names. Page after page of them. His confident, seminary-trained worldview falters. He sees the sheer scale of the loss, the brutal, alphabetical reality of it. He looks up at you, his eyes wide with a new, horrified understanding. "How did you keep your faith?" he asks, his voice a whisper. You pause for a long time before you answer. "I didn't," you say quietly. "I lost it completely." You try to explain to him what it was like. You tell him about the failure of prayer, the collapse of ritual. The moment you stood before the altar and felt only rage and emptiness. You tell him that your faith did not return as a great, shining revelation. It seeped back in, slowly, quietly, over years. You found it not in the catechism or the writings of the church fathers, but in the grim determination of the survivors. You found it in the courage of Will, the farmer's son, teaching you how to scythe wheat. You found it in the resilience of the widow, creating a new family from the ashes of the old. You found it in the simple, sacred act of sharing a loaf of bread with the last 13 people on earth. My faith is not in the God who is in heaven. Michael, you tell him, tapping the old, worn register, it is in the God that is in these people, the God that is in the will to live, to rebuild, to plant a new crop when the old one has rotted. That is the only God I have any use for anymore. Michael does not understand. Not fully. He is from the new generation of the church, an institution humbled and changed by the plague. He is part of the great rebuilding, but he does not have the scars. The debate will rage for centuries about the plague's effect on the church. Did it sow the seeds of the Reformation by exposing the church's powerlessness? Did it lead to a decline in morality among the new, hastily trained clergy? Or did the church's role in maintaining social order in the aftermath actually strengthen its hold on people's lives? You know the truth is simpler and more complex. It broke the old church, the proud, unassailable institution. And from the pieces, something new and more human had to be built. Your final pilgrimage of the day is to the hill overlooking the village. You walk slowly, your staff finding its familiar holds on the path. You come to the great, long mound of the plague pit. 30 years of sun and rain have softened its edges. It is covered now in a thick blanket of grass and wildflowers. It looks like nothing more than an ancient barrow, a pagan tomb from a forgotten age. It is beautiful, and its beauty is a terrible lie. You stand there, and you remember the smell, the weight of the bodies, the sound of the earth hitting the shrouded forms. You remember the faces. You are the only one left who does. You are the guardian of this place, the sentinel of their memory. You see the grandchildren of the survivors playing at the foot of the hill. They know this is a place to be avoided, a place of sadness. They call it the Sleepy Hill. They do not know how right they are. As you turn to leave, you think about the strange new world the plague created. You have heard stories from the few travelers who now pass through. The old bonds of feudalism are broken, with so few workers. Peasants across the land are demanding higher wages, more freedom. They are leaving their manors, seeking better lives in the towns. The world is in a state of unprecedented social upheaval. You, in your own small way, were at the forefront of that change when you and Will and the others laughed in the face of the Lord's agent. You make your way back to your bench outside the church. The young priest, Michael, is lighting the candles inside for Vespers. He begins to ring the bell. The sound is strong, clear, and steady. It is not the lonely, desperate clang you once rang over a silent village. It is the sound of a living community. a small, stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished. You close your eyes. You are at peace. The miserable task is over. The rage is gone. The despair is gone. All that is left is a quiet, deep, and abiding sadness. A scar on your soul that will never fade. But you have learned that scars are not just a sign of a wound. They are a sign of healing. You lost your flock. You lost your God. But in that great, terrible silence, you found your purpose. You were the shepherd who stayed. And so, the story of the old priest comes to its gentle close. The sound of the evening bell fades into the twilight, and the village of Oakhaven settles into a quiet, well-earned peace. The great, sorrowful mound on the hill is softened by the falling darkness, its tragic history held safely in the past. The last keeper of that memory is at rest, his long, miserable task finally, truly, over. Let the weight of his world lift from you now. Let the chill of the damp stone and the scent of the grave lime dissolve into the warmth and comfort of your own quiet room. Feel the gentle heaviness of your own body, the slow and steady rhythm of your own breathing. The air you breathe is clean and safe. A soft, invisible current that carries you toward the shores of sleep. Your own bed is a sanctuary, a peaceful parish where you are the only soul and the only duty is to let go. There are no more sorrows to bear, no more horrors to witness. There is only this moment, this quiet, this profound and simple peace. Allow the darkness behind your eyelids to deepen, to become a soft, velvety curtain that separates you from the day. Your thoughts, like the villagers of Oakhaven, can now be at rest. Let them settle. Let them still. You are safe. You are warm. You are drifting now on a silent, easy tide, moving effortlessly toward a place of deep and dreamless slumber. There's nothing more to do, nothing more to hear. Only the gentle, quiet invitation of the night, calling you home to rest,